Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall, and today we're joined by Locked On Magic host Philip Rockman. Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall. Today we're joined by Locked On Magic host Philip Rossman-Reich to discuss how big of a threat the Magic are today and down the road right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase medical.com. And I wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now available on each and every platform you could plausibly find us. That includes on YouTube, so be sure to hit that notifications bell and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Be sure to do the same on your audio podcast platform of choice. And now you can talk to Alex and I. Just subscribe to our Subtext. All you have to do that is hit the little link in the episode description, and you'll be able to text with Alex and I about Knicks content and really whatever's on your mind by hitting that button and subscribing to Subtext. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. I'm lucky enough to be joined by Philip Rossman-Reich, who we've had on the podcast a bunch over the years. There's no one doing better coverage of the Orlando Magic. And they're a team that fascinates me, right? Not necessarily intimidating to the Knicks this year, but one that could potentially take some games off the Knicks. 2 young stars in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner that you could argue, I don't know if I'd go that far because I love Jalen Brunson, but you could argue have a higher ceiling than anyone on the Knicks. When the Knicks are really in I guess, the heart of their championship window, which we want to say is in the next 2 or 3 years, how scary are the Orlando Magic going to be? Are they going to be the team that the Knicks would potentially be facing in the Eastern Conference semifinals or finals? Well, we'll find out right now on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, as promised, lucky enough to be joined by the host of Locked On Magic, Philip Rossman-Reich, as we continue to break down the Knicks competition in the Eastern Conference. So the Magic, Philip, let me know if you disagree with this. I would assess them as not necessarily a threat to the Knicks this year, but one down the road that New York certainly has to be aware of. Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero. The Knicks have a whole lot of depth. They do not have 2 frontline players with that kind of ceiling, but let's take a look at the present for now. What's kind of the best case scenario for Orlando this year?
I mean, I think the best case scenario for the Magic this year is to be what the Knicks were, 3 years ago when they got to the playoffs for the first time and really kind of shocked everybody. I think, I'm a Northwestern fan. And so like way back in the day with Gary Barnett in the mid-90s, he kind of set the goal of we as a program need to be Iowa. And everyone's like, well, Iowa's okay. Like they're consistently competitive, but they're not like winning the Big Ten every year. But it was just like, that's kind of the stepping stone you have to get to. Like where the Magic are at right now is they're trying to take that first step. They're trying to get into the play-in tournament. They're trying to play meaningful basketball late in the season. They're trying to feel that playoff pressure. And so when I look at the Eastern Conference landscape, I look at the New York Knicks as sort of where the Magic want to be within the next year or two. Like maybe they'll get there this year. I think they have the talent to be a really competitive team. And if things break the right way, maybe the Magic are competing for a 6th seed and for avoiding the play-in entirely. But in reality, like the Knicks where they were last year, at least, are kind of the team that the Magic are trying to supplant in the next couple years. And so that's kind of where like I have my eyes of saying, okay, the first step is this. The next step is where the Knicks are at. And that's kind of where the Magic are trying to get eventually.
So let's just say that best case scenario comes true. What does that look like? Does that mean one of Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner made an all-star team? Does it mean both of them made an all-star team? And what is, I guess, kind of the collective identity? Because in the past, and tell me if I'm off on this, I've always found it's kind of Toronto Raptors-y, right? We're going to have absurd size, absurd length. Last year, you had Bol in the mix, Wendell Carter, Paolo, Franz, everyone on the court, basically 6'10" or taller. Just kind of, sort of a walking freak show. And it worked some nights. It didn't work other nights, but what does it look like this year if everything clicks and you kind of hit that peak?
Yeah, I mean, I think like also all-star thing is sort of like a chicken or an egg problem. Like
sure.
Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner become all-stars if the Magic win, and the Magic win because those two become all-stars.
Right.
So that's it's certainly on the table. The kind of rookie season that Paolo Banchero had is the kind of rookie season you see from the elite of the elite players in this league. He was being compared to Blake Griffin, to, among Magic fans, like he didn't quite have a Shaq level rookie season. But, like the Magic probably have not seen a rookie play that well since Shaq back in 1993.
Yeah.
He's certainly on that trajectory. And so for the Magic to kind of take that leap and to, avoid the play-in and be a solid playoff team, it's going to take individual leaps from several players. So obviously you start with the stars, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner. Maybe Franz Wagner becomes a guy who suddenly looks like he's on an all-star trajectory. Paolo Banchero adds some efficiency. Now that part of the puzzle is solved. It's getting a healthy season from Markelle Fultz and seeing how he manages the team with fewer mistakes. It's Jalen Suggs becoming a more dynamic, not only just a dynamic defender, but a more dynamic offensive player, making fewer mistakes, fewer turnovers, fewer of those young team mistakes. So generally, I think for the Magic, it's not one big thing that's going to propel them from where they were last year to where they want to be or to the playoffs this year. It's going to be like a series of little things. It's being more mature and turning the ball over less. It's winning some close games that maybe they weren't winning last year. It's managing injuries and having the depth to withstand some of the injuries they suffered last year. It's a lot of these little things, I think, coming together. I don't think the Magic are that far from being that team. It's just we haven't seen them do it yet, and I think that's kind of the challenge. I'm sure you could speak about this with the Knicks and their recent run.
Yeah,
you see the potential, you see the hope for it, but because they haven't done it, you don't quite trust it yet, and that's kind of where the Magic are at. It's like everyone sees what this team can be, but they haven't done it yet. So no one's quite ready to say like, oh, this team is doing that this year.
What does an ideal team around Paolo Banchero look like, and how close is Orlando to achieving that? Because when you made the analogy of the Knicks 2 years ago, I'm like, all right, well, Paolo's kind of obviously they're Julius Randle, and there's some similarities there, right? Both super talented, ultra powerful, giant human beings who can shoot a little bit, and Julius, like it took him now 7-8 years into his career for him to really hit his potential in that. And his potential turned out to be either a 40% 3-point shooter on pretty low volume in a year where there were empty arenas. And that's probably the best case scenario ever, or 34-35% on super high volume, which is what he was at last year. And that's opened up so much of his game. And to be clear, Paolo is obviously going to be the better player. He is a higher upside, but I think some of the challenges that are inherent to building around Julius are also there with Paolo, where, and maybe the Magic have this, like you're looking for that center that can protect the rim and also stretch the floor. You're looking for guards that can be lead guards, but don't necessarily have to be it. And the offense can run through Paolo. But what does it look like to you if Orlando builds this thing right around him?
Yeah, I think that's obviously the question. The first and obvious need is shooting. Like life is easier when everyone can shoot. And you mentioned like having a big who can protect the rim and step out beyond the arc a little bit. Wendell Carter looks like he's tracking that direction. And certainly I think is a really gifted and underrated defender around the league. But you need shooting around him. Franz Wagner is is a pretty solid shooter, but Markelle Fultz is still a questionable shooter. I think Magic fans would tell you he's better than people give him credit for, but he's still only taking like 2 3-pointers per game and making 32% of those. So it's not like, I say this to my listeners all the time. Your ability to shoot is not about how many 3-pointers you make. It's about whether defenses think you can shoot or not. It's more your perception as a shooter to a defense. A defense is perfectly happy to let Markelle Fultz take 3-4 3-pointers a game. And if it's the one game where he makes 2 or 3 of them, that's okay. They'll live with that. Now, if he does that over a month, then they start shifting and changing their defense. So, I think the obvious need for the Magic is to find some shooters to spread the floor around Paolo so they can get him the ball in the low post, use his passing game, use maybe some pick and roll actions with his size to really kind of suck defenders in and not have them pack the paint so he can work a little bit freer there. But, honestly, like, I think the biggest thing is that this season is about is figuring out what this team needs and figuring out how this team, how defenses, especially if the team can get to the playoffs, you could probably speak to this better than anyone. You don't know your team's weaknesses until you're in the playoffs, and opponents can just really like pick you apart and expose your every flaw. I feel like, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, with my perception of the Knicks is that, there's a little bit more panic because, Julius Randle's an older a little bit older, a little bit probably closer to his peak. Jalen Brunson certainly in that category too. So those flaws become fatal. Whereas like for a young team like the Magic, having your flaws exposed is great because now your young players know what they need to work on. The team knows what it needs to build around. And I feel like that's really kind of the central thesis for the Magic season. And what this season's really about is like saying, okay, what do we actually need? Like, what does a successful Paolo Banchero team need? How are teams going to attack them in the playoffs? And then we can build out from there. And Franz Wagner's a great, I think, running mate because they're of similar size, but Wagner is great cutting off the ball. He's an excellent shooter. He can run some pick and rolls. He doesn't need the ball to be super effective. If anything, Magic fans are always shouting for him to get the ball more because he doesn't have it enough or he doesn't take enough shots, even though he's second on the team in field goal attempts. This season is very much about figuring out what the Magic team needs, and among a lot of the other players on the roster, figuring out whether they're the right guys to put around this group.
All right, guys, when we come back with Philip, we're going to ask a very important question. Is there enough shooting on the roster right now? And how are they going to have to alter their roster to ensure the best possible circumstances for their two young stars? But before we do that, we got to tell you about our friends over at Jase Medical. They offer up the Jase case, which provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And I don't know about you guys, but as time goes on, my expectation is there will, even in the comfy confines of the Northeast, there will increasingly be natural disasters in the world. And that is an unfortunate thing. But if it's our reality, we have to be prepared. And with the Jase case, you can do that. And it's super easy to get, which to me is the best part. With storms, shortages, pandemics, reliance on China, and supply chain issues, we need to be prepared now more than ever. Jase Medical is simple. All you have to do is go online, fill out a form, and then you get a prescription, life-saving medications sent right to your door. The Jase case gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medicine in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have that medication in hand. You can save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Yeah, I think, this is almost an aside from where I want to go, but I think Franz, his I'm going to phrase it as his ceiling, but what I honestly think is his trajectory, because I'm super high on him, is just flat out one of the best second bananas in basketball. And he has all those role player skills with genuine superstar talent. Like it's a dream. I'm a little bit jealous despite the two teams. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that Franz is missing is like that superstar attitude and mindset,
right?
I'm gonna score this. I'm gonna score against this defense, and he shows that a little bit with Germany, but he still defers to Dennis Schroeder. And talking to Germany fans during the FIBA World Cup, they felt very much like Magic fans who are like, "Why does Schroeder have the ball late in games?" I get it; he's the veteran; he's carried this team forever. Yeah. But there were several games for Germany where Schroeder nearly shot them out of the game. And it was just get Franz a touch. Good things happen when Franz touches the ball. And, everyone always tries to pit star play, especially young stars, against each other. And it's just that's just not Franz's makeup. And I don't think it ever will be. And so that's going to be the interesting part of how these two young guys develop next to each other.
Yeah. I'm going back to watching that US-Germany game. And sometimes when Team USA obviously we'll lose sometimes and recently frequently at the World Cup, but it's rarely because sometimes it's a big guy just because they didn't put someone on the roster who was 7'2", 240 pounds, but you'll almost never see it with a guard or wing player where it's I guess America just didn't produce someone to physically match up with this guy. That's kind of what happened at the World Cup. It's we don't really have a 6'10" shooting guard to throw at him. Maybe if everyone came,
the 6'10" shooting guard they had to play backup center last year.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. That was tough. And they're both Orlando Magic. So congratulations on that. Another quick tangent to your point on the Knicks. I hear it. And I think it's maybe simmering in the background of some Knicks fans' minds, this idea that, all right, we are really good right now. And we have this incredible depth and we have a fairly young team, out of the teams to make the second round of playoffs, clearly the youngest team, I think, in terms of average age by about 2 years. But have our older guys topped out. And in terms of Jalen Brunson, I don't think so. I think there's still another level for him to hit. And he kind of hit it during the playoffs last year where he was incredible and he was looking like someone you could theoretically describe as a top 10 player in the league.
Like just speaking from the Magic perspective, like we saw that in that game in Orlando where Brunson just took over the end of that game. Like that's that's what the Magic hope Paolo is going to become. But if you're going to be successful in the playoffs, you need a guy like Brunson. Like that's what the Magic have frankly been hunting since T-Mac left, is a guy who can just take over a game late and win you a basketball game. And the Knicks have that in a guy in Brunson. And he's proven that. He proved that with the Mavericks 2 years ago. He proved that with the Knicks again this year. And that's really what you're after. That's really what you're trying to build around. And the Magic think they have that with Paolo. He showed some flashes of that, but he's also a rookie who made a lot of mistakes. So, you don't know yet.
I know. And I think to that point, like they have not their finishing piece, right? Because they still, you want either that alpha wing or a truly dominant big guy like a Joel Embiid, which I know you might not love it, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed over here that happens one day. But point being, like I look across the rest of the Eastern Conference, and last year before the season we did these future rankings, and I think I had the Knicks something like 23rd, maybe 22nd. Alex had them, I think, like more like 15th, 16th, which is probably closer to the truth. The Knicks are like maybe borderline top 10 now, but I still see teams like the Magic with Paolo, like Detroit with Cade. I could go through the whole Eastern Conference that theoretically have a young guy that has like a higher ceiling, maybe than anyone on the Knicks. And again, that depends on what you think about Brunson and where the next step is there. But it's sort of this interesting thing for New York where like maybe there's a superstar trade on the horizon, maybe there isn't, but they're really good right now, but they're not quite good enough to break through. And normally you would have this thought of like, all right, just wait for Giannis to age out, wait for the Celtics to inevitably break up, wait for the Sixers to inevitably break up. But for the Knicks, like, I don't know if this group, and maybe it depends on a role player becoming more of a star, like an Emmanuel Quickley or Quentin Grimes. I don't know if they have that ceiling. The beauty of Orlando right now is like, at least, and it's kind of the beauty of every team at time, you can talk yourself into them eventually having that ceiling. But to me, for it to work, and this is a very long-winded way of getting there, and I apologize for that. Is there enough shooting, and what happens at the guard spots? Because I was surprised when they took Anthony Black. He ended up looking awesome in Summer League. But between Fultz, Black, and Suggs, and to a lesser extent Cole Anthony, that's four guys who seem like they would be best at point guard, and all of whom are somewhere between poor to uncertain to potentially good shooters, but not there yet. So how does that sort out? Because that's the big question I have.
Yeah, I think that's a big question that a lot of people have. I mean, I've been thinking a little bit about this. I've been doing some, the Magic are celebrating their 35th anniversary this season. So we've been doing some history thinking on Orlando Magic Daily. And like, we did like the, 5 worst starters of the Dwight Howard era and the 5 worst starters of Shaquille O'Neal era. And like a constant theme just kept popping up with those like championship teams where they were constantly searching for that like 5th starter to like complete their lineup. And it feels like the Magic are kind of in that spot with the shooting guards. Like they feel very comfortable with Markelle Fultz and his future is a little bit up in the air, but they feel pretty comfortable right now for the time being with Markelle Fultz. Franz and Paolo have the forward spots. They like Wendell Carter. And so like those 2 guard spots are certainly the ones that are like very much like if the Magic are going to make significant leap or if that star trade, because, the Knicks might feel it a little bit more urgently because of their relative age. And like you said, the other teams that are starting to kind of rise up, Orlando, Cleveland, I think Indiana's done some really interesting and good things. I think they're quietly a really interesting team. And the East just in general has gotten better. Like I think, sitting here 2 weeks before training camp, I think every team in the East, save for maybe Washington and maybe Detroit, but I think Washington, Detroit fans
Detroit
could
with Cade is going to be better.
Yeah, Detroit with Cade is going to be a lot better. I even think Washington, if they stay healthy, that's their big thing. I just don't think they have the depth. But Washington, they have scoring. Like I think even they can talk themselves into like, hey, if everything breaks right, if the 8 or 9 things we need to break right, the play-in's not that hard to reach. The play-in tournament's been a blessing because everyone believes they could do something at the beginning of the season. So the East is a lot better than it used to be. The Magic are going to be one of those teams that if they rise at the trajectory that they think they're going to rise at, they're going to be a team that gets involved in some of these star trade discussions and maybe take the kind of risks that Cleveland took in grabbing Donovan Mitchell last year. New York, I think, again, certainly I feel like, my perception is, I think they were really smart to kind of stay patient and not like push all their chips in, wait for the right guy to push their chips in for. But I think like they're going to start feeling the pressure to push those chips in because teams like Orlando, Indiana, Cleveland are going to be kind of nipping at their heels to like take those spots. And there's only so many of those spots available. I think we saw even Atlanta try and get involved in a Pascal Siakam discussion because they know like they got to strike because they may not be able to hold on to what little spot they have for very much longer. Orlando certainly is not, I think, at a point where they're like panicking or saying like, hey, we got to do this, that, or the other, but they're for the first time going to have to make some decisions on some guys. Markelle Fultz is a free agent at the end of the season. Cole Anthony is a restricted free agent at the end of the season. Those will be the first two kind of big money contracts that they hand out in this phase of their rebuild. They got to start thinking about in 2 years, Franz Wagner getting his potential max extension or Paolo Banchero a year after getting his max extension. They've been able to play around with money not meaning anything for a little while, but now they got to start really honestly assessing these players and trying to, and this goes for everyone. Like I think everyone on the roster outside of Paolo and Franz, is really going to be under the microscope here saying like, is this really the guy that fits us?
All right, guys. Next with Philip, we are going to get into Jonathan Isaacs. If you're a longtime fan of the podcast, he's someone, at least for on the court reasons, has always fascinated me. One of the more dynamic defenders in the league, one of the more intimidating defenders in the league. Is he going to play a role for Orlando this year? And how good will Orlando actually be this year? Are they a potential first-round playoff matchup for the Knicks? Maybe if the Knicks are high up the standings. We'll talk about that in just a sec. But before we do, I want to tell you about our buddies over at FanDuel, because once you snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, you'll be a part of America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that includes spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I am looking at that Patriots-Jets line for this week. And as of today, the New England Patriots are 2.5-point favorites. I think that might actually be a little bit low. And I'm shocked I'm saying that because I think the Jets are a far more talented team. Haven't been super impressed with the Pats so far. But Bill Belichick against the bad Jets quarterback. Everyone remembers Sam Darnold saying he's seeing ghosts. Zach Wilson might be seeing zombies out there as well. Like, it is not a good mix. He's been terrible against them. I think the Patriots cover pretty easily in that one. So if you're with me on that, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season the right way. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
To your point, that guard room is really, really crowded. I've been saying to people like this feels like a make or break season for Jalen Suggs. He's entering year 3. He had injuries in his first 2 years. He looks like a really strong defender, but he doesn't look like the guy that Magic fans were like fist pumping and high fiving that fell to them at number 5 2 years ago. His shooting's been inconsistent, and that's putting it nicely. To me, like, honestly, I've told people this, he's either going to be the starter at shooting guard by the end of the year for the Orlando Magic, or he could be out of the rotation and they could just say, we're going to give Anthony Black a look. Because at this point, Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs do a lot of the same things. Black is an excellent defender who can't shoot. Jalen Suggs is an excellent defender who can't shoot. Black's probably a better playmaker than Suggs at this point too. Suggs is a better scorer. The Magic are going to have to start making some decisions on some guys. And, if you're looking for a team that is kind of in line to make a consolidation trade and make a more aggressive move next offseason, the Magic might be that team. And so I think Orlando stood pat this summer. The only moves they made, they added the 2 rookies, Anthony Black and Jet Howard, and then signed Joe Ingles to a contract. The only guys they lost off the roster were Bol and Admiral Schofield, who they dropped down to a 2-way contract from a full roster contract to end the season. The Magic are a team that is going to use this season to evaluate what they have and then make some hard decisions on some guys next summer. And that includes potentially, a free agency for Markelle Fultz and giving him a deal or not giving him a deal, or Cole Anthony entering restricted free agency. There are decisions coming, and that guard room is really, really crowded. And ultimately, it's hard to have a Paolo Banchero and not have shooters around him. They need shooting, and a lot of their guards are just not good enough shooters at this point.
Yeah, I was mystified when they took Black, and then you watch him in summer league, and you're like, all right, this guy's maybe just such a talent.
my draft philosophy, especially when you're drafting that high, is you take the best player available and you figure it out later. At that high in the draft, passing on talent is usually a mistake, is usually how you get criticized. If you're drafting on need, maybe you could trade around a little bit, but you and I think talked during the Locked On mock draft. Like I was not super thrilled with what I had at six anyway. And so, I think there are opportunities to trade down, but there's also needs to be someone who's willing to trade up. And, for whatever you want to say about it, Anthony Black checks off a lot of boxes this Magic team. They like positional size. They like positional versatility. They like what I like to call skill versatility, which I define as like having a player who does something at a size and position that is not typical for a player that size and position. A Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner can run point guard at 6'10". There's not a lot of guys that can do that. Anthony Black at 6'7" can play all three positions. I think the Magic will end up playing him a lot at the 2 or the 3 this season. You'll probably pair a lot with Cole Anthony and Franz Wagner for good chunks of the year, just because they don't have anywhere else to put him, and you probably want Cole Anthony in there to shoot next to him. He's going to be moved around a lot, and it could be a little bit of a rough rookie season for him because I think the skill that he has is sometimes tougher to translate immediately. But they love their size. Like a lot of people criticize the Jet Howard pick, and I think Jet Howard could be a real big impactor because again the Magic needs shooting so desperately. Yeah. But everyone was surprised they took him over Grady Dick and Jordan Hawkins. But it was just like when you actually stood them all next to each other, it's like, oh, Jet Howard 6'7" can play the 3. The Magic played him at the 4 in summer league, and I think that was not by accident. Yeah. The Magic wanted the size, and they ultimately chose size over everything, which has kind of been the MO of a Jeff Weltman, John Hammond front office.
Speaking of which, Jonathan Isaac, tall guy, can't shoot that well, hasn't played in a few years. Tantalizing talent back when he was on the court all the time. Like he was. If I had to pick someone in the NBA who I would not want to pressure me in a pickup game, 94 feet up the court, he might have been the number 1 pick in that make-believe draft. Is he healthy? Is he going to be part of the rotation? What's the deal there?
All indications are that he is healthy. He played 11 games last season, so he did finally come back from the ACL injury in the bubble. He did finally come back. Was playing very limited minutes and then ended up with a hamstring injury that required what the Magic dubbed as minor surgery, which I don't know if there's such a thing as minor surgery, especially for a guy who hasn't played 3 years, was dealing with knee issues that typically lead to hamstring issues. So who knows? But all indications are that he is healthy. All indications are that he will be in training camp. He will participate fully in training camp, and that he's going to be good to go for the season. Now, does that mean he's going to play 20 minutes a game? Probably not. He's probably coming off the bench. There's a lot of hope that, Isaac can give a little bit. Even last year, just coming back, he looked really springy and like he didn't miss a step defensively. He was still one of the best defenders on the team. So I think the Magic plan to use him as a backup power forward and see where it goes. I imagine he will not play in very many back-to-backs. I imagine that they will have a rest protocol for him. Fortunately, he's not a star, so we don't have to worry about that. But at this, I said this last year. Anything you get from Jonathan Isaac feels like extra and a bonus. One of the things I was a little uneasy with what the Magic did this offseason is I didn't think they properly kind of covered themselves in case Isaac has to miss time. Like if Isaac has to miss significant time, then you're platooning Paolo or Franz as your backup power forward, or you're using a Joe Ingles as a backup power forward, or Jet Howard, like I said earlier, or going big and having Mo Wagner play some power forward, which he can do, but those guys are obviously not at the level of a Jonathan Isaac. And so I think a lot's riding on Isaac to be healthy and to make it through the season. If he doesn't, his contract next year is fully non-guaranteed for $17 million. He could be a really valuable trade chip at the deadline if someone's looking to cut some costs, and then the Magic are looking to add someone of significance. So, we'll see.
I think it's very similar to the Knicks where that's kind of how I viewed the DiVincenzo signing is like, oh, this will help them today, and it will help them if they have to trade Emmanuel Quickly or Quinn Grimes or RJ Barrett down the road. And I feel like the Magic have insulated themselves in a similar way. All right, last question on my end. We've talked. Sorry, my mic popped out.
Oh, okay.
1 sec. All right. Here we go. All right, 3, 2, 1. All All right, last question on my end. We've talked about the ceiling for the Magic, but how good do you think they actually are? Like you just mentioned, everyone in the East, or if not everyone, the majority of the team can talk themselves into being better this year. Zero-sum game, though. Some are going to be, some inevitably are going to be worse. Where does Orlando fall on that spectrum?
I think Orlando is going to be a play-in team this year. I imagine they will fight for the 7-8 game, and I think they'll probably end up falling into the 9-10 game. And they'll get that, to me, the most important thing this year is getting experience playing pressure basketball, playing meaningful games to the end of the season. A lot of people don't know this because you look at their record, they're 34-48. It's just like, oh, that's a kind of moribund record. They were the last team eliminated from playoff contention last year. And they were 29-25 before they tanked their last 3 games because they were eliminated from the playoffs. So yeah, they played the majority of last season as a 500 team. 500 gets you into the play-in at this point in the East. If you're winning 40 games, you're probably going to be in that play-in tournament. You're probably going to be in the 9-10 games. So I think the big thing for Orlando is learning how to manage a season and having the maturity. And I think you probably can recognize this with the Knicks. They're a little bit more veteran, but like going from where they were in the 21 season to the 22 season, that maturity and knowing that everything doesn't carry over from one season to the next. You gotta, you do have to rebuild everything. Finding consistency is really, really difficult, especially for young teams. And this Magic team is still very, very young. I mean, Joe Ingles is the outlier at 35. I don't think there's another player on the roster older than 30 currently. They're extremely young. They're going to be going through playoff pressure for the first time. They're going to be going through winning pressure for the first time. But this team really believes in what they're doing. They really believe, they really bought in last year. They were really, really strong last year. They are slowly carving their identity. And the thing with young players is they all should get better, and I think everyone's expecting a lot of players on this Magic team to get better. And so that, to me, they should be a play-in team. They should be a team that is fighting for a spot in the playoffs. Whether they actually get into the playoff picture or not, I don't know. We'll see how things play out, but I expect them to at least be in that 9-10 game. If not, maybe sneaking into that 7-8 game for the play-in tournament.
Yeah, I am. I can say objectively they are very high on my non-Knicks teams. I'm excited to watch play. I want to see how the weird guard combo works for anyone in New York watching who did not watch a lot of Orlando outside of when they played the Knicks. Markelle Fultz can absolutely end someone's life.
He is not Philadelphia Markelle Fultz. Honestly,
yeah.
Magic fans will shout this as loud as they can. If you're looking for a most improved player candidate, Markelle Fultz. I mean, I don't even know if they give out that award anymore, but Markelle Fultz is your guy. After the All-Star break last year, and I think that's significant because he came back from his ACL injury after the All-Star break last year. So All-Star break at the end of the season, he averaged around 16 points per game, 6-7 assists per game. Was shooting at he's not a great 3-point shooter, but he's willing to shoot threes. So he's not like Ben Simmons, who's not shooting threes at all. He will shoot threes when he's comfortable shooting threes, but he still shot 50%. He is an excellent mid-range jump shooter. He gets to the basket. If he could, this Magic team is going to be all about controlling turnovers, as most young teams are. But he cut the hair. He's back to looking like Washington, Markelle Fultz. Hopefully hopefully the spirits are back with him there, because people forget how good and dynamic he was at Washington.
Yeah.
The Magic do feel very comfortable about their point guard spot. A lot of the national media is like, what do the Magic could do at point guard? And all the Magic fans are like, we got Markelle Fultz. We don't need to do anything at point guard. We got our guy. And we'll see if that parlays into a new contract or not, because it's a contract year for Markelle Fultz. But Fultz is really good. And I don't think the wider NBA world appreciates that because of the perceptions around him from before.
There's a reason he went over Jason Tatum, Lonzo Ball, Josh Jackson, everyone else. The dude was an absolute killer in college. Still hasn't fully figured out the shot like people thought he would, but still is an absolute killer. All right, Philip, before I let you go, can you tell everyone who's looking for more Orlando Magic coverage where they can find all your work?
Yeah, the best place to find my work, besides listening to Locked On Magic every day, is at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Still posting at least something every day. Very strong. We're doing our player outlooks right now as we count down to the beginning of training camp. But yeah, OrlandoMagicDaily.com is your place for Orlando Magic content. You can follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD or at OMagicDaily.
All right. Thanks so much, Philip. So for Locked On Knicks, for Locked On Magic, that's it for this one. On the Locked On Knicks end of things, plenty more team previews to come as we make our way through the Eastern Conference and player previews. And I'm sure you can find a lot of the same on Locked On Magic. But until next time, we'll talk to you soon.